Colombia is bleeding again. 18 killed in just hours. A truck bomb ripping through Cali and a police helicopter downed by a drone in Antioquia. The attacks, blamed on FARC dissidents, mark one of the deadliest days since the 2016 peace deal. Explosives in the streets, drones in the skies. Colombia's fragile peace is collapsing under the weight of resurgent armed groups. At least 18 people have been killed and dozens more injured in two major attacks in Colombia, both blamed on dissident factions of the former Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia or FARC guerrilla movement. In Cali, the country's third largest city, a truck packed with explosives detonated on August 21st outside a military aviation school. The blast tore through a busy street, killing 6 and injuring at least 71, according to the mayor's office. Hours earlier, in the northern department of Antioquia, a national police Black Hawk helicopter taking part in coca eradication operations was struck down by a drone in the municipality of Amalfi. The attack killed 12 police officers. President Gustavo Petro accused FARC dissident groups, rebels who rejected the landmark 2016 peace deal, of carrying out the assaults. Colombia's half-century conflict claimed more than 450,000 lives, and these new attacks underline the enduring threat posed by armed groups who refused to disarm.
What happened in Cali shows us the transformation of what has been called Ivan Mordisco's dissidents into a terrorist act. Let me explain myself. It is not the same thing to engage in combat, where both groups are armed, as it is to kill unarmed civilians. What happened in Cali is an act that spreads panic among the civilian population, killing them systematically because it is the second time this has happened during my administration. There have been a high number of civilians killed systematically.
Petro said on X that the attack on the police helicopter occurred as the aircraft was transporting personnel to an area in Antioquia in northern Colombia to eradicate coca leaf crops, the raw material for cocaine. Images shared on social media showed vehicles on fire, destroyed homes, injured people on the ground, and people fleeing in panic amid the sound of alarms and screams. Cali Mayor Alejandro Eda ordered martial law for the country's third most populous city. He also announced a temporary ban on large trucks entering the city and called on the public to report information about the incident for a $10,000 reward. Defense Minister Pedro Sanchez blamed the attack on the Central General Staff, EEMC guerrilla group led by warlord Ivan Mordisco. The group broke away from the defunct Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, after it agreed to lay down arms for a historic peace deal in 2016. Left-wing guerrillas, right-wing paramilitaries, and murderous cartels still control pockets of Colombia, but the country has enjoyed years of relative calm. But there has been a recent surge in violence that experts say demonstrates armed groups are regaining strength and the ability to carry out coordinated, complex attacks. Former top security officials have voiced concern that the Colombian intelligence services have lost a step and are no longer able to detect and foil plots. The Colombian peace process primarily refers to the negotiations starting in 2012 between the Colombian government under President Juan Manuel Santos and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC-EP, aimed at ending decades of armed conflict that caused massive casualties and displacement. These talks culminated in a landmark final peace agreement signed publicly in 2016, which aimed to end hostilities, disarm combatants, promote the political participation of former rebels, address rural development and illicit drug trade issues, and establish transitional justice mechanisms for human rights violations committed during the conflict. Despite its historic importance, the peace agreement has faced serious challenges in implementation, which pose a risk to lasting peace in Colombia. One of the main difficulties is the continued activity of dissident FARC factions that rejected the 2016 accord and remain active as armed groups involved in violent criminal activities. These groups often clash with security forces, other armed groups like the ELN, National Liberation Army, and among themselves, causing ongoing insecurity and violence in various regions. They also target social leaders, human rights defenders, and ex-combatants, undermining the reintegration process and community safety. Additional challenges include slow and uneven implementation of the peace agreement's provisions, especially in rural areas most affected by the conflict. Critical reforms in land redistribution, rural development, and security still lag, contributing to persistent poverty and the illicit economy in these zones. The Colombian state's limited presence and difficulties in establishing authority and providing services in conflict-affected municipalities further complicate the situation. Violence, displacement, and forced confinement continue in some rural regions, impeding the peace process's progress. Moreover, the Colombian government's ambitious total peace strategy, which extends negotiations to multiple armed and criminal groups, faces operational and political hurdles. Armed groups expand their influence faster than the government can negotiate effectively, stretching security forces thin and risking greater fragmentation among armed factions. Localized negotiations risk fostering competition among dissident groups and can make some appear as local power brokers providing state-like benefits, which could reinforce their control rather than diminish it. Since the 2016 peace accord in Colombia, designed to end decades of armed conflict primarily with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, violence has persisted mainly due to dissident factions who rejected the agreement, along with other armed groups and drug cartels. Numerous armed attacks and clashes between dissident FARC groups and Colombian authorities, including assassinations, ambushes, roadblocks and bombings targeting military, police and civilian infrastructure, especially in southern and northeastern Colombia. In June 2021, FARC dissidents conducted a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, VBID attack on a Colombian army base in Cucuta, injuring dozens, including US military advisors. Since 2019, FARC dissidents, estimated at 2,000 fighters, have been responsible for the vast majority of attacks attributed to FARC dissident groups, focusing on regions with drug trafficking routes to control. Armed confrontations escalated in northern Antioquia in 2023 between the Gulf Clan criminal cartel and FARC dissidents, leading to violent operations. In early 2025, intense combat between FARC dissidents and the National Liberation Army, ELN, in the northeastern Catatumbo region caused more than 80 deaths, widespread displacement, and suspension of peace talks with ELN. Throughout 2025, dissident groups have increasingly employed drones in attacks against security forces, including a recent drone attack that downed a police Black Hawk helicopter in Antioquia, killing 12 officers. Earlier in 2025, multiple former FARC members participating in the peace process were assassinated, and social leaders have been targeted, highlighting ongoing threats to peace consolidation. The Colombian government has declared states of emergency and launched military operations in conflict-affected zones, but the peace process remains fragile with persistent attacks by armed groups refusing to disarm. Earlier in June 2025, there were coordinated attacks by the EMC faction in the Cauca and Valle del Cauca regions against police posts and municipal buildings, resulting in multiple casualties and injuries, marking one of the year's most violent days. Throughout 2025, Colombia has seen an increase in drone attacks, with over 115 drone incidents recorded in 2024. Mostly attributed to illegal armed groups, including attacks on security forces, such as drone strikes killing soldiers. These attacks mark a significant escalation in violence from armed groups that rejected the 2016 peace agreement, further complicating security and peace efforts in Colombia as the country approaches elections in 2026. These violent incidents reflect the ongoing challenges in fully implementing the 2016 peace accord due to armed dissidents who reject the peace deal, territorial control battles, drug trafficking, and government presence limitations in rural areas.